Hi, this is Eric from longboxreview.com. Welcome to the show and welcome to the Christmas Gab Bag 2020 with my good friend George from Meanwhile at the Podcast. Hey, George.
Hey, Eric. Hello, everybody. Merry Christmas. Happy holidays, everybody.
Well, Merry Christmas to you, George. And thank you again for joining me on our now annual, I shouldn't say now, I meant to say our now fourth annual.
Is this number 4?
This is number 4.
Oh, I look forward to this from the moment we shut off the mics the year prior, all year long. You know, annual traditions, when you think about them all year, when they stop the Thanksgiving Day parade and Macy starts planning ahead on the day after Thanksgiving, I tell you, I start planning ahead for our next Christmas Gab Bag the day after we record.
Well, and thankfully, George reminds me throughout the year to ensure that we don't forget to do this at the end of the year. So, yeah, but this is good because, you know, George, this year 2020 has been and I say this with all the love of my heart, a crap fest in many different ways. So I am okay. Let me back up. I think George, you know this about me now. I'm a bit of a curmudgeon when it comes to the winter months.
Yeah. Wait, what? Huh?
This
is the first I'm hearing of this.
Truth be told, maybe a little bit towards Christmas as well. I got a little bit of Ebenezer Scrooge's blood flowing through my veins.
Wait, you mean even outside of the 2020 crap fest that you just called it?
Yes.
I don't recall that. I don't recall you being a curmudgeon around Christmas time.
That might be news to everyone, except
even if there isn't snow on the ground.
Except for my wife, she knows how much of a Scroogey type person I can be during Christmas time. But mostly it's it is about it's just like I hate the cold. I just don't like cold. I don't even mind snow. I just don't like snow on the streets or on the sidewalks. You know, things that cause me to have to work harder to do something or get somewhere.
Right. You just want the snow in the trees, on the rooftops,
on the ground.
You want it to just stop there.
Yeah.
Right. You don't want to have to shovel it, deal with it, drive through it, whatever.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes, precisely.
I understand.
But
you live in the wrong state.
I know.
I hate to tell you.
The wrong altitude for that matter. I blame my wife. Except, wait, she followed me to grad school and we stayed. So, I guess I only have myself to blame.
I didn't realize, though, this curmudgeonness. So now does this mean we really should be doing summer-themed comics like in July or something? Like, is this going to be our last Christmas Gab Bag? I mean, come on.
No, like I was going to say, so despite that kind of Scrooge-like mentality I have about Christmas time, I'll say, this year has just been so difficult in a lot of different ways, you know, for me personally, but for many people across the world. And I am taking a little bit of solace in the fact that we have this Christmas, this particular Christmas. I am looking forward to spending time with my family as much as I can, even with the pandemic still in full swing, and just trying to enjoy it as much as possible. Just to put a cap on this craptastic year that we've had. And in the hopes, of course, you know, winter being a time of basically death in the natural world. But what happens after that? We get spring and rebirth, right? And that's what Christmas is about. It's all about birth and in the spring rebirth, you know, to tie it into the whole Christianity aspect of it. So I am very much looking forward to the new year and kicking that off here with Christmas. And of course, that starts today, George, with you and the Christmas Gab Bag.
So I guess it helps that we're recording this Christmas Gab Bag in September.
It would have lifted my spirits for sure at that time.
Well, if Christmas holiday themed comics don't lift your spirits, then yes, you really are a Scrooge.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm glad this is going to put a little oomph in your step.
That it's funny you say that, because when last week when I started taking notes, deciding on the comics and taking notes on the comics for our discussion tonight, I was actually home alone during Thanksgiving that week.
Now, nobody can see me doing the Macaulay Culkin, two palms up to my cheeks, opening my mouth real wide, but that is exactly what I'm doing.
Yeah. So I like I said, I was home alone during the Thanksgiving week. All my family members were elsewhere. Just I talked about it I talked about that in my last The Gutters episode. But anyway, one of the bright points of that week, George, was sitting down and reading these Christmas comics and preparing for this conversation. So this was a perfect timing situation.
I'm glad that in a roundabout, circuitous way, I had a role in trying to put a smile on your face and give you back some of that Christmas holiday spirit.
I feel like I feel a little bit like Scrooge on Christmas morning after the three spirits have visited him.
I can imagine you just sticking your head out the window. You there, boy. What day is this? Go get me the turkey from down at the 7-Eleven.
I don't know that I want to have that turkey, George.
Yeah, no. And the boy would just flipped you off and said, "What's a shilling?"
All right. Well, I suppose we should explain a little bit about what the Gab Bag is, in case someone is a first-time listener of the Christmas Gab Bag.
Yes, every podcast could potentially be somebody's first.
Exactly, just like the comics.
Yeah.
But what George and I have been doing for the last 4 years now is that we choose 3 Christmas-themed or Christmas-adjacent, as the case may be, comic books, and we just kind of talk about them with each other. And since we are talking through Skype video, sometimes we'll show each other pictures of the stuff, which works great for an audio medium such as this podcast. But you guys can go check out these comics, go buy them yourselves if you have them in your collection already, maybe revisit those. And I guess, George, we'll get started. We'll start with you with your first choice, which is?
Well, thank you. Well, first of all, I have to say, I wasn't kidding around that I start planning our Christmas Gab Bag right after we finished the one prior. And I had my titles already picked the day after we recorded Gab Bag 2019. Then as the 2020 holiday season kicked in, I totally upended everything that I had planned, and I started checking out other holiday-themed comics with Christmas trees on the cover or whatever. And this is what brought me to that. So none of these, well, except maybe my last choice, were on my list from whatever the day after our last recording Gab Bag was. So right here, I have The House of Mystery, number 257, published by DC Comics. And this is dated March. It was a bi-monthly comic, so it was dated March and April 1978. And if you look in the fine print at the bottom of the first page, it indicates that this is volume 28. Now, we all know it's not really volume 28, but I guess maybe at that time, every year was a volume, like they do for magazines.
Huh. Yeah, I guess so.
So I don't know, but I thought it was kind of weird. I had to, get out the old magnifying glass and make sure these old eyes of mine really read that properly. But so this is an 80-page comic, all new stories, and it has $1 cover price. Remember those days when you can get 80 pages of comic for a buck?
DC Dollar Comics, I love those.
Yeah, those were the days. And on the cover here, we have the 2 kids running down the stairs, and in the foreground, they can't see the demon that is obscured by the Christmas tree. He's behind the Christmas tree, and behind all the gifts, and he's ripping a doll up. And there's a nice in the foreground, nice little doll head with an eye missing. So if that doesn't scream Christmas, I don't know what does. Now, this is a cover by Joe Orlando, so anybody who collects comics may recognize the name Joe Orlando, probably a frequent cover artist for DC. But right here, I was curious. So again, as of this time last year, I didn't even know this comic existed. But then I saw it as the holidays were approaching, and I said, I want to see what the heck is going on in here. So let me break open the cover and let you know that right on the inside, Eric, there is a Hostess ad. All comic fans know the Hostess ads, and this is a Hostess cupcake ad, and it's Batman and Sable Lady. Dun dun dun. So you can't go wrong with a comic that begins with a Hostess Hostess cupcake ad in it.
You know, George, I can't believe I'm going to say this.
Go right ahead.
But I almost kind of miss ads in comic books.
I do too. And I'm not going to go. I think in the past when we've done this, I think maybe I've gone so heavy to the extra paraphernalia that's in a book. I'm not going to do that now, but I had to call out the Hostess ad. I had to do it.
I love those Hostess ads.
And I have to admit, House of Mystery is not a go-to title for me. And from what I've heard you say on your show all these years, I don't think a title like this would have been up your alley back then or even now.
Yep, exactly. Yeah. I don't think I own one copy of that title.
Same here. And the only reason I bought it was because of the Christmas cover theme. I don't think I have a House of Mystery or any kind of similar type of book in my collection at all either. So I'm new to the whole thing. I know what the premise is. I know that you have Cain and Abel. They're the caretakers of the House of Mystery, but I really and they tell stories in their comics, but I really didn't know what to expect when I opened the cover here. So So if anybody doesn't know anything about the House of Mystery, it's kind of an anthology book, and it was horror stories with a little bit of a twist, suspense stories, and the stories were told by the brothers Cain and Abel. And this is no different. There is a framing sequence, and then there are a bunch of stories that follow. And the framing sequence is written by Paul Kupperberg, and the art is by Rick Estrada and Wayne Howard.
Oh, nice.
All names that should be familiar to people who have been collecting comics for the 7 or 8 decades like I have. And it begins with, and I wrote this down now so that we can do this here. In the framing sequence, we have the what's the official title of "'Twas the Night Before Christmas: A Visit from St. Nicholas"? What's the official title?
I think that's it.
Okay, well, everybody knows the poem, and of course it begins with the poem, but it says 11:32 p.m. Christmas Eve. A lone figure races frantically toward the single beacon of light in the snow-covered night. The freshly falling powder seems to absorb all sound, and the brightly garbed man runs as if in a dream devoid of any reality. But who is to say what is real, especially here at the House of Mystery? And the man running toward the House of Mystery, which is decorated for Christmas, mind you, is a guy in a Santa Claus costume, sans mustache and beard, but he's holding 2 guns instead of having a mustache and beard. So he's running away from something. And Cain and Abel are sleeping with sugar plums in their head. So the guy breaks into the house because he's running from the law. And in a bit of exposition, you find out when he listens to the radio that his name is Killer Cohen, and he's running from the law. And here's something that I didn't realize. They say something like he murdered 6 people in Louisville, and he was last seen heading for the Kentucky state border. So is that kind of letting us know where the House of Mystery is? I don't even, was it in Kentucky?
I think it moved around.
Is that what it is? And that would kind of make sense with more of the recent incarnations I've heard of it. But as they're stuck as he's stuck in the house with Cain and Abel, as he's hiding from the law, he says, this is exactly how he says it. What are you geeks staring at me for? Ain't you got nothing better to do? So Cain says, we were thinking of some fascinating tortures, but we figured you wouldn't go for that. Do you have any suggestions, Killer Cohen? So he says, I don't know. Hey, either of you know any stories? Which, of course, is typically what a person holding some people hostage is going to ask. Hey, do you know any stories? So they go into a few tales. Now, you know what? I was going to tell you about each one, but I'm not going to go into detail of each one because Eric, as anybody who knows from our past Christmas Gab Bags, I tend to pick up the books that look like they should be all about Christmas, but they aren't. So once again, I got snookered. At least the framing story is about Christmas. And I expected all of these other stories to be, but no go. So
Okay.
I'll just touch on them real quick. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but the creators may interest you here. So the first one is called The Ebony God. Arnold Drake is the writer, and E.R. Cruz is the artist. And the artwork in here is really beautiful. I mean, if this is typically what a House of Mystery comic looked like, I can understand why people got into this. So the Ebony God, basically, there's an evil archaeologist. Well, not so evil, more self-centered. And he wants to get this icon, this Ebony God, and bring it back to the States so that he can get the acclaim from whatever archaeologist club that he's a part of, whatever explorers club. And he has to fool the natives of this country that he's in to get this icon. And of course he fools them. And the thing is, if to get the god, to remove the god from its perch, it would bring death and destruction to the villagers. And of course he sacrifices the villagers to their death and destruction and steals the idol. He gets on a plane and heads over to everybody's congratulating him. Hey, you just won a big award, almost similar to a Christmas story. Hey, it's a major award. So he's going to go to a ceremony and win a medal. And as he's being presented with the medal, natives all of a sudden appear in the audience and they shoot arrows at him and kill him. And as he falls to the ground to his death, again, a holiday story, as he falls to the ground to his death, he pulls the curtain away from the large idol that he stole from these natives, and lo and behold, the idol's not there anymore. It magically appears back in the natives' country, and it has the medal that he won around its neck. And they say, the idol has returned. It brings peace again, and see, it wears new magic around its neck. Ah, so you see, you don't fool around with the ancient idols in these countries unless you're Indiana Jones.
George, I don't understand what you said earlier because I can't think of anything that screams Christmas more than that story.
Well, to take that even a step further, there is a one-page gag in here called Kane's Game Room, and it's kind of like in the style of like you would expect to see a Mad Magazine one-page comic to be. And there's a guy laying on the ground, looks like he's been bit by a vampire in his neck, and the doctor comes along and he confirms, hey, he was just bit by a vampire. And sure enough, the last panel are two very engorged mosquitoes flying away, hiccuping as if they're drunk. Again, a holiday story. Now, here we go. A gift from Satan over here. Now, gift from Satan. How can we... Again, George, the artwork is beautiful here.
Wait. You know, though, that Santa is an anagram.
Yes. And you would think they would have mentioned something like that here in the book, but they did not. This one is written by Jack Olick with art by Ernie Chan and Bill Drought. Now, this one is about a witch that has been convicted of a woman who has been convicted of being a witch. And the sheriff says he'll have mercy on her and make sure her death is quick and painless if she would just tell him where she has hidden her gold, where she has hidden her fortune, because it is well known that all witches have a stash of gold somewhere. And of course, he says, I'm not a witch. I don't have anything. And he says, fine. I'm going to brand you, and you're going to die a horrible death at the stake. So as he's doing this, in the background, you see the devil drawn in certain areas in the background, kind of looking on as if you're watching a play, but there's somebody looking from the rafters or somebody looking from off stage, kind of investigating what's going on here. So the woman dies her horrible death, and the guy is not convinced that the woman was not a witch and that she did not have gold. So he goes to her house, and it's funny how they draw the devil here. The devil is watching him ransack her house, and he's hiding behind a dressing screen. You know those screens that people would go behind to dress. It's funny how he looks. You know what? I might have to take a picture of this panel. You know how some places do panels of the week?
Mm-hmm.
I might have to take a picture of this panel because this is undevil-like, unsatan-like to me, the way he's hiding. He's a little too he's being a little too coy and careful behind the screen. That's not how the devil should be acting as far as I'm concerned. But anyway, he's observing. And of course, there's a spell found in a book to conjure up the devil to give you everything that you want. And he invokes the incantation and nothing happens. And the next day, voila, the devil appears. And he goes, "You called? You rang?" And he goes, "Yes, I want you to, I want to be rich. And I want you to give me immortality and all riches." And he goes, "Look, guy, you know the deal. The bargain is your soul. If I make you immortal, I can't take your soul. So immortality is off the table." So he goes, "Look, I found this gold coin in this woman's house. I want a room full of coins exactly like this one, and give me 50 years to enjoy it." And the guy goes, "Fine, you got it. Here you go." So guy wakes up and he's in a room with all these riches. He tells his wife, he goes, go buy, almost like, "Hey boy, go get me the turkey from the 7-Eleven. Go get the big meal. Let's go get yourself some clothes." Well, the sheriff realizes that his sheriff's wife is buying a lot of things that she shouldn't be able to afford. So they come back into the guy's house, and the sheriff comes in with his deputies, and he goes, "Look, we know that you're stealing from us." And he goes, "No, sir, I'm not. But is it? I came into some money. Is it bad that my wife is treating herself? We're going to have a good meal. She's going to get some good clothes." And he goes, "Yes, but we went to the merchants that she went to and took a look at the gold coins, and they're all identical. They're counterfeit." That's how the devil got him, because he said he wanted coins like the one that he found in the woman's house, exactly like them. And turns out the devil is the one who left the coin in the house for him to find. Aha. So the sheriff sentences the man to a lifetime in his worst dungeon in the bowels of his castle. And the guy goes, no, I have 50 years to live. And he goes, "Well, you're going to live them out in solitude in this dungeon." There's a tale. There's a holiday tale for you. And razzleberry dressing. And of course he goes insane. Anyway, here's another. Now I don't know how many more of these I should get into, but here's another one called "To Catch a God," story by Barry Jameson, art by Michael Golden.
There you go.
Yeah. So again, the art in this is spectacular. There are people looking for. There are explorers looking for Eros, and they're on a deserted island, and the main older explorer thinks he sees a winged god flying overhead, and his two hired explorer friends, a man and a woman, don't see what he sees. They climb to the peak of the highest mountain, and sure enough, they see this gigantic egg. And the guy goes, "Yes, I finally have proof that this winged god exists. This is its child. We will stay here with this egg, and when the god returns, we will have our proof that the god exists." Well, the hired lackeys push him off the cliff because they want the egg for themselves, because they figure they can sell it to the highest bidder when they get home. Well, it turns out that the winged creature that the older gentleman thought he saw wasn't Eros, it was a harpy. And the harpy came and killed the two people who were threatening her egg. End of story. By the way, spoilers abound here, folks. If for some reason you wanted to just dig out House of Mystery 257, I'm giving it all away. There's another Kane's Game Room, this time with 3 single-panel gags that, again, have nothing to do with the holidays. They have to do with death, which, okay, Eric, you did say winter, death, but
yeah, there you go.
There's a story called Mirror Madness, where Oh, now who did this one? This one was by Joe Gill, Binder. Is that how you pronounce Otto Binder's name?
I think so.
And Guy Lillian, with art by Jerry Grandinetti and Tony DeZuniga. I recognize Tony DeZuniga's name, and I recognize Otto Binder. I don't recognize the other names in there. But this is a plastic surgeon who wants to use experimental techniques. Has a guy who was in a shark attack. Was it a shark? Oh, it doesn't matter what it was. He comes in. He's all messed up, and he wants to get the plastic surgery to get his looks back. And his superficial wife wants his looks back either, because you can see in the thought balloons that she wants nothing to do with this guy after he got mauled by the shark or whatever accident he encountered. The plastic surgeon uses experimental techniques on him, and he looks like a frog man. After I don't understand why the experimental technique made him look like a frog, just in the face. So because the operation was a failure, they want to kill him and make sure that he doesn't go against the doctor and sue him for malpractice or anything like that. But of course, whatever they do to try and kill him doesn't kill him. And he wakes up, sees what he looks like, and he figures, oh no, the plastic surgeon, I got to go back to him and have him fix my face. Not realizing that his wife is running off with the plastic surgeon, and they're making a life for themselves together. He finds a life at the local circus, and he becomes the merman, the fish man that everybody comes to see. The plastic surgeon wants to take his new girlfriend out to the carnival, and because he's a plastic surgeon, he likes to look at the freaks. And he wants to see this fish man, this frog man. And of course, the woman doesn't want anything to do with it, but he drags her in there. And of course, the frogman recognizes his wife and sees that she is running off with the plastic surgeon. So he goes over to the mystic tent, because of course, every carnival has a mystic that's really a mystic. And she gives him an evil amulet. And she says, "This, you can get your revenge, but you can only do it once." And what does he do? He goes into the House of Mirrors with them. And as they comment about how crazy they look in the mirrors, their faces and their bodies contort and change to their images that are in the mirrors. And as they come out laughing hysterically, they expose their horror to all the people in the carnival. Merry Christmas, everybody.
What is Christmas if not about some sort of retribution?
Yes. Now, this is the point where we take a break and we go back to our framing story, where we find out that the police have enlarged their manhunt for Killer Cohen, and he has to stay there a little longer. So Cain and Abel aren't too happy about this, and Abel is portrayed as a bumbling fool, and Cain, it's almost like Abbott and Costello. Cain is Abbott, Abel seems to be Costello. So Abel isn't too happy that the guy is going to hold him hostage for a little longer. But they hear some scraping on the roof. And the guy goes, whoa, what's going on? Did you guys call the cops? And they go, no, we don't have a phone here. We couldn't possibly have called the cops. So the guy goes, okay, I understand, must be a tree limb. How about you, Fatso, being Abel? How about you tell me some stories now? So he goes, all right. So now they have a couple of more stories to tell. Now this one here, get this one. Haunts Upon a Time by E. Nelson Bridwell, with art by Jess M. Jodloman. I don't recognize the name. It looks like the coloring for all these stories was done by a person named Jerry Serpe. So this one is just a guy who kills his wife, who happens to believe in the supernatural and seances. And of course, he kills her for the money. And he realizes that there's money to be made in the castle that they were going to go to for a seance. So he goes to the castle saying that he was going to be there with his wife the week before she passed away. And he would like to have a seance to try to contact her. And the people there go, okay, why don't you stay here for the night? It's going to rain, and we'll do a seance tomorrow. And he intends to rob them. Well, when he goes to rob them, he realizes, they're ghosts. And they're the ghosts of this castle in this manor. And what they do is they summon up his wife, and his wife's ghost haunts him at his house for the rest of his days. More of Kane's game room with a couple of more single panel gags. Before I get into this other story, Eric, I have to apologize to you and your listeners. I took notes. They're here. I'm waving them in front of the microphone. I took notes to try and do this as succinctly as possible. And for some reason, I'm not following them, and I don't know why, and I apologize for that. But I felt that if I looked at the pictures also, because I didn't just read these, I read these a couple of weeks ago, and I felt I needed the reminder of actually going through the book real fast. So I realized what we're talking about here aren't necessarily Christmas stories, but I since it is in a framing sequence of a Christmas comic, I felt I should at least go over the stories, and I'll try and do these a little quicker. But this one here, called The Fastest Draw in the East, is written by Scott Edelman. Now, you may recognize Scott Edelman from Eating the Fantastic, the podcast, but he's a horror writer, and he was a comic writer, created the Scarecrow character for Marvel Comics. Didn't you do Captain Minerva, Dr. Minerva for Captain Marvel?
I don't know. Yeah. Okay.
I think that's what he said, because he went to the Captain Marvel premiere because I think he created Dr. Minerva.
Okay.
But Dr. Minerva, I think there was a gender swap, and it's just that the character, he created it, back in the day in the 70s. But anyway, this is by Scott Edelman with art by Mark Bright and Aubrey Bradford. And Eric, I know we don't think about this stuff, but could you imagine if you were a weatherman or a weatherwoman, a meteorologist, and you saw people, a person like Al Roker, who's been in the business for, 30, 40 years on the Today Show as that staple, and you say to yourself, my goodness, if I could just get a break like that and have my career for a couple of decades, but these institutions, they just don't leave, and they don't give us young bucks a chance. And you might get that little bit of a bit of jealousy and almost have a hatred or something against these people, because those jobs are few and far between. And once you get them, you're kind of ensconced unless you do something wrong or you finally retire. Well, this story is about a comic book artist who feels that way toward the entire industry and doesn't feel like he's getting a fair shot at being a comic book artist, and he focuses his hatred on one particular comic book artist, almost like a Jack Kirby type, or I'm trying to think, maybe a Steve Ditko type, or just a guy who's been around for decades, and he feels he's not getting his big break for the characters that he wants to draw. And he works in an occult bookstore, of course. What says Christmas like an occult bookstore? And as he's going through some of the books, and he's thinking about how his life is so rough because this older artist just won't leave the industry, he finds an incantation to bring death to one's enemies. And of course, in his words, with some hokey warning that its use could spell death to its caster if he's less than adept at it. But does he take heed of that warning? Of course not.
Of course not, no.
And he creates a spell, and what the spell does, the artist, who is drawing 6 monthly titles, he gets them all in under deadline. The guy is sitting at his drawing board, smoking a cigar, drawing a demon. And the demon on the page comes to life, jumps out of the panel, and kills the artist. The person, our protagonist, who wanted that job happens to be in the offices of the editor of the comic book company, who's getting the news that the artist is dead. And he, of course, being the business person that this editor is, he's on a deadline, and he needs somebody to take over on the title that artist was drawing. And who does he have in his office but an artist? And he goes, "Hey, kid, do you want to do this?" And of course he goes, "Yes, of course I do." And the kid gets the job that he coveted all this time. I will say this. I was kind of hoping that there would be some sort of a reference in the names of the artist and the editor, but I didn't make any connections there. You know how sometimes you pay homage or you joke around with some famous person's name in a story. I didn't see that happening here. But what happens is, as the artist is drawing a page that is a tribute to the deceased artist to go on the last page of the comic book, the artist pops out of the panel, grabs the younger artist, pulls him into the comic book, and keeps him there and says, well, you always wanted to be in comics. Now you're in comics.
Oh, my God.
Mm-hmm. So that was pretty good. So Scott Edelman, if you're listening to this, I'm a fan of not only your writing, but your podcast, Eating the Fantastic. So if I tag you and for some reason you actually listen to this episode, this was a good one. Thank you very much. And there was another Kane's Game Room, this time with things happening in operating rooms that are not very pleasant. And then we have Father to the Beast, which is basically a werewolf story. And I'm not going to go into too much detail there, just to say that the script is by, and I think I heard your co-host Peter from the Legion podcast, David Michelini. I think I've heard him pronounce it that way before. Is that correct?
Michelini, yeah. Yeah,
and the artist is famous for zombie and horror pictures. Arthur Suydam, Suydam. I recognize the name. I just don't know how to pronounce it.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that one.
Oh, okay. Well, again, all these for us comic book fans, classic artists and writers here in House of Mystery. So anyway, it's basically a werewolf story. A werewolf is decimating a town, and the twist at the end is it's actually Dr. Victor Frankenstein creating a monster, and as it keeps getting killed by the villagers, he digs him up and keeps trying to bring him back to life. And at the end, our framing story, the noise on the roof, if you recall, there was a noise on the roof while Killer Cohen was holding Cain and Abel hostage, and he doesn't believe that it has nothing to do with the cops being there. So he goes up to the roof, and he sees somebody on the roof, and he goes, no, it can't be you. That's impossible. Stay back or I'll, and he shoots, and he falls off the roof, and he lands on the antlers of 8 reindeer that happen to be parked at the base of the house and gets impaled on the antlers. And as Santa Claus flies off with his reindeer, the lead reindeer have Killer Cohen impaled on their antlers as he flies off into the night. A Merry Christmas to all, and to all a good night.
Oh, my God. Santa Bloody Santa.
Yeah. Next issue on sale during the 3rd week in February.
for the Valentine's special.
Yeah, exactly. So that is the House of Mystery Christmas special. And I'm not going to get into the letters pages. It seems like all the letter writers kind of, they weren't too thrilled about issue number 254, or at least all the stories in it. But they also seem to have this, they want to spur Cain on, apparently. Like they keep saying bad things to Cain because Cain is the person who's answering their letters. So they keep saying things, they're trying to antagonize him in one way or another in the letters column. And there is a Superman movie report, because remember, this came out in 78. Actually, it came out in 77. If it was the March-April issue of 78. So they are giving you, I guess every month they would give you reports on the progress of the Superman movie. And that was an interesting read in the back of the book. So that's the 80-page House of Mystery number 257. Sorry for my rambling there, folks, and sorry it wasn't more Christmas-oriented. But I hope you had a good time as Cain and Abel regaled you with tales before Killer Cohen got impaled by Dancer and Prancer.
Oh, man. Yeah, see, this is exactly why I did not gravitate towards those kinds of comic books.
Yeah, and I will admit, the demon on the cover, while tame by today's standards, that would have turned me off on the spinner rack, I think.
It was the doll missing the eye that caught my attention, George.
Mm-hmm. and the spare arm and a spring laying right next to it. Yeah. But a good stable of creators in there.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well, my first comic, George, has some good creators. If you'll pardon the segue.
Well, and hopefully there'll be a lot of mischief and mayhem in there too.
I guess you could say that. Sure. Yeah. My first choice, first pick here is Daredevil, the Man Without Fear. This is, I'm going to hold up the cover for George to see. This is volume 3 of the book that came out in 2011. This is issue number 7.
I think this is one of the most current comics we have ever done in our Gab Bag history. I don't think we've ever done anything in the 2000s, at least in the 2010s. So go, Eric.
Here, actually, last year, George, I had something from 2018.
Oh, did you?
Yeah,
oh, okay.
Yeah. Well,
and we allowed that?
Yeah. It's our show. We can allow whatever we want.
Okay. So that's good. I remember that cover. That's an awesome cover.
Yeah. This issue's by Mark Waid, Paulo Rivera, Joe Rivera, Javier Rodriguez, Joe Caramagna, and the cover is by Paulo Rivera. And so this is Daredevil doing a snow angel on top of a water tower in New York. And so you get of course you get the Daredevil logo, which is all red, and then Daredevil in red, but everything else is black and white, and a very nice stark contrast on this cover.
I love it.
And I think it really reminds me of Christmas time, because, you know, what says Christmas more than darkness surrounded by cold death, and in between that is some flashes of color, like in this case red.
It's black and white and red all over.
There you go. See, if I were smarter, I would have come up with that. Oh, and I forgot, or maybe I just didn't really notice it until now. There is a string of Christmas lights here, George, coming off the window.
Oh, yeah. I didn't notice that either.
Very small, but there you go. Someone celebrating Christmas in there.
Is there a hostess ad in there?
No, there's a Got Milk ad though.
Oh, cool.
But no hostess.
Is somebody
ads.
famous, or is it somebody famous?
It's Apollo Ono.
Oh yeah, the speed skater.
The speed skater, yeah.
Yeah, cool.
I wouldn't have known who that was unless there was a caption there, George.
Oh, okay.
But I do recognize I remember seeing the series of ads in a bunch of different comics at that time. But so this story is not your typical Christmas story. It's more a story set at Christmas time. But what happens in it, I think, pertains very well to the Christmas season. So basically what happens here, Matt Murdock is taking a bunch of kids who are, they're blind kids that attend this school. And so every year, apparently, he takes these kids out of the city. He charters a bus and takes them out of the city, and they go to a farm or something. They go, I don't know, upstate New York or something. Anyway, it's snowing. There was a crash on the highway, on the freeway. So they had to take this, the bus driver decided to take this alternate route. Anyway, the deer runs out in front of the bus. The guy swerves, they crash, and the bus driver unfortunately ends up dead. And it's up to Matt to take the children and find shelter and get rescued, get some help, because he's injured, he's bleeding, and it's only a matter of time. As he says here, and this does not sound like anybody I know, George, complaining about the season, but he says 15 degrees, if that, and falling. Could be sinkholes 5 feet away. Could be coyotes up here. Could be animal traps hidden in the snow. No compass, no sound of traffic, not one clue which way to the next town or how far, and I'm losing blood. Ho, ho, ho.
Except for the losing blood part, it sounds like a podcast host that I know
Right?
complaining about snow and Christmas. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I'll sure George this, but that panel that I just read from also shows Matt now dressed up in his Daredevil costume to keep warm, because he's given his coat and his, well, I guess in the wreck, his shirt and pants got kind of ripped up. But he's given his coat to one of the other kids to help keep them warm. So he's now reverted to his Daredevil suit. Of course, no one can see it, so it works out just fine. But before all that happened, I wanted to mention this, because this is how much Christmassy is this at the law offices of Nelson and Murdoch. They're having a little get together for their office and other people that they know. And so, your typical office Christmas party. And, they head out from Matt's office, and they go out, and Matt is wearing this, I'm not Daredevil sweater. I don't know if you can see that, George.
Yes.
So this is during the time that Matt was outed as Daredevil. And so, of course, law enforcement is coming at him. Other people are suing him. And his line of defense is to lie and say he's not Daredevil. And so he had this sweater made, which, by the way, I think they did produce these, George, or somebody did.
Oh, really?
Somebody got the license.
I'm surprised.
I wanted to get one of those so bad, and for some reason I did not. But he's also not wearing his cane that he's always carrying around. It's now striped like a candy cane, and he's got some mistletoe tied to the end of it. And of course, he carries it around with him wherever he goes, including next to these pretty young, I assume, attorney interns or junior partners or whatever, manipulating the situation. I find that whole scene just delightful, that he's reveling in this, in the Christmas spirit, supposedly, but really what's happening here is that underneath it all, as Matt Daredevil always is, he's racked with insecurities and regrets and wants to atone for his sins and all that, while he's hitting on all the pretty ladies, including the assistant DA that's in the story. And that's one of the things I love about Paulo Rivera's art at this time in this comic, George. I don't know if you saw that panel. It's kind of hard to see. But Rivera will draw or show us panels of how Daredevil sees with his radar sense. Mm-hmm. And it's like everything is lined, like contoured, like a contour map, I guess is what I want to say, but in the shapes of people and objects. And I think Rivera does an excellent job of portraying that in this issue, and also other issues in which he did the art. So anyway, these poor kids, led by Matt, they're walking through the snow, trying to find shelter, and at one point, he's trying to get the kids to talk so as to not start panicking or and I don't mean this in the literal sense, but that could also be taken this way, but freeze out there in the snow and the cold. So, they got to keep moving. And so he gets them to start talking about, well, what do you want for Christmas? One of the he says, I know that Stuart wants for Hanukkah 8 kisses from Tanya, which one of the kids says gross. And then this is one of the delights of this issue, George. One of the kids says, I want a Spider-Man web shooter. Thwip thwip. To it. And then another kid says, I wish Spider-Man was here. He'd save us. And Matt grumbles, I know Spider-Man. He'd be peeing his pants. We don't need saving. We're doing great. And then what we see, the camera pulls back on the shot, and they're heading nowhere. They're heading further into the depths of the woods. So you think things are going to get really bad here pretty soon, and indeed they do. But first, they come across, or Matt hears the roar of a truck. So someone's starting their truck, and somebody nearby is getting ready to leave their house. And so he starts running towards the direction of this truck, ends up tripping and hurting himself even more. And he can't even get up. He was injured pretty bad in the crash. And now it looks like if he just stays there, he'll be dead. And this is the point of the comic, George, that I really loved, because you have these kids, they're young, they're scared, they're cold, they're blind, and yet they end up saving Matt. They save the superhero. They grab some twigs. They take the rope from that Matt had used as a tow line from his billy club that he's created for his Daredevil work. And they end up dragging him in the snow with a makeshift, what do you call it? I'll just say a sleigh, just to make it
perfect,
more Christmassy.
Apropos, yeah,
yeah. Anyway, so they end up at the house where they were heading towards. The people had already left. They weren't able to get the attention of those people, but Matt breaks in, calls the cops. They come and rescue them. And like I said, the reason I really love this is, these kids come together to help Matt out. He thinks before, of course, that, he's got to save them. He's the adult. He's the superhero. And the roles were reversed. And he says, next Christmas, they'll probably want me to take them skydiving. Who knows? For right now, all I want to do is get them back where they belong at Christmas. Home. Like I said before, that's really what I'm looking forward to this Christmas season is home and family and good times. So that's what really had me gravitating towards Daredevil number 7.
That was a perfect Christmas issue. Have you ever watched TV comedies? About this time of year, they'll run a bunch of TV comedies that are syndicated, and all the holiday episodes that have to do with them, whether it be, I don't know, Everybody Loves Raymond, The Golden Girls, 2.5 Men, whatever. You can tell what stations I watch on cable. But there are some episodes that are Christmas adjacent at best, or we could even say it's more like the argument about movies, like, is Die Hard a Christmas movie? And then the question comes up, is it a Christmas movie, or is it a movie that just happens to take place in December? Those kind of things. And while yours, I think, fits the mold of being a Christmas movie, a true Christmas comic, that House of Mystery one I did was more, it happened, it was more like the episode of The Big Bang Theory where the B story was Sheldon trying to find out what he should give Penny for Christmas. I guess it was the first Christmas episode. But the A story had nothing to do with Christmas. It was a physicist came to town, a hotshot physicist, and he steals Penny away from Leonard and all this other stuff. And again, you could tell what stations I watch and what TV shows I watch. But so my House of Mystery was adjacent. Yours was really a true Christmas comic, and I applaud you for that. And as I go through all this and I get to my second book, I guess maybe mine is, again, more Christmas adjacent than a true Christmas movie, but I will let you and your listeners be the judge of that. Now, this time I may go by my notes. And again, I have notes, folks. This one is called The First Big 64-Page Impact Winter Special. Now, do you remember Impact Comics?
Oh, I do.
Yes. I have a few Impact comics. In fact, I just got rid of a couple of, what is it, The Legend of the Shield? I forget exactly what it was called, but the Shield was the character. I have a few issues of The Fly, the Jaguar. I don't know how they got in my collection, and I don't even recall reading them. But they did have some top-notch creators behind them as they put this Impact universe out there. Even though I have these comics in my collection, I don't remember reading them again. I don't remember how they got there. So to me, this comic was my first experience with the Impact universe. Now, I didn't do much research, but from what I recall, these were originally Archie characters,
Right?
although they were called MLJ comics or something
Yeah.
for the superhero line.
That's what I recall as
And
well.
I think they previously, Archie themselves tried to resurrect them as the Red Circle comics or something like that.
Yeah, that sounds familiar. Yeah.
And I thought that happened prior to this, and based on the letters column in here, my suspicions were confirmed. I didn't do any research, like I said, which, we have the internet. I could have just looked it up, but I didn't take the time. But DC Comics got the license from Archie to create this Impact Comics universe, which was separate from the DC universe as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
It was its own thing. But again, they got some top-notch creators to do it. And this is the winter special that came out in 1991. The cover was done by, now I got the name. Oh, darn it. See, this is why I don't go by my notes, because I can't read my handwriting, and I found out the cover artist after I wrote my notes. Ah, yes. Grant Mime? M-I-E-H-M? Does that sound like a familiar? I think I've seen the name before from the 90s. And again, since this came out in 91, we're at the beginning of, everybody blames the 90s for things going dark. I think things were still a little fun and frivolous at the beginning of the 90s. But here's the plot. And again, this is another book where there's a framing story and other individual stories by different creators within it. The framing story is President George H.W. Bush, remember this is 1991, is going to light the national Christmas tree on one of the hottest December days on record. The Secret Service agents are complaining about the heat and noticing that the Norwegian boys choir singing We Three Kings aren't breaking a sweat. Well, that's because they're robots, Eric. And they're there, of course, to kidnap the president. And what they do is they shed their camouflage as children and become their robots. They grab the president and they fly off with the president. And as the secret agents say, well, A, we can't shoot because we might hit the president, and B, we can't send the Air Force after him because they're flying at the speed of sound with the president. I don't know the math behind that. I don't know the science, but that doesn't sound right. Because they're just holding the president like Superman would hold Lois Lane and fly off.
Yeah.
If they're flying at the speed of sound, can a human survive that? I don't know.
Wouldn't think so.
Putting too much real world stuff in there. Well, anyway, it was good comic stuff. And while they're scrambling and they're trying to figure out who did it, the Christmas tree lights pop on, and it says "Merry Christmas from Indigo." And that's when we cue the title and the credits. The gift of, and Eric, you're going to have to correct me here. Is it the gift of the Magi?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm pronouncing it right?
Yeah.
I've never knew how to pronounce G-I-F-T, gift, right? That's how you pronounce it. I just wanted to make sure. Anyway, the gift of the Magi. That is the title of the story. And get this. Mark Waid did the script. Again, comic fans, your listeners know who Mark Waid is. Carmine Infantino did the pencils.
Mm.
And Marshall Rogers did, and I quote directly from the credits, the thin inks.
Thin inks?
So the finishes and the inks. So, I mean, if you were to look at this artwork, it doesn't look like Carmine Infantino art. So I guess maybe he did the layouts and Marshall Rogers finished it up and inked it. Because I'm accustomed to seeing Carmine Infantino's art on The Flash, and these characters don't really look like what I would have seen the characters in The Flash look like.
George, can you just hold that up to the camera for me real quick? I'm very.
Do you mean what like a panel?
Yeah, I just want to see what Marshall Rogers finishing Carmine Infantino looks like.
Let me see. I gotta go this way. There are the Secret Service agents. Can you see them?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Very interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So I was amazed. I knew Mark Waid had something to do with the Impact universe. I had remembered that. So I was pleasantly surprised to see that he did at least a framing sequence. But to see Carmine Infantino and Marshall Rogers as the artists for this, I mean, right there, I was like, wow, this is very interesting. Again, not knowing anything about the Impact universe, I thought that this was a great exercise. And we talk about it on our show, and I think we've talked about it like when you and I have done our preview stuff, or I've guested on your show, where we wonder how somebody just picking up a comic today, especially the way comics are written compared to the way they were when we were children, if you could just pick up a comic today and get the story in that one issue and be hooked enough, A, to stay, or B, yeah, I just picked this up at random, I liked it, it was a good book. Or are you in part 5 of a 100-part story and there's no exposition, and you're coming in so in the middle that it's not so much that you're coming on the 7th episode of the 3rd season of Breaking Bad, but you're coming in at the 30th minute of that episode where you really have no context as to what the heck is going on. This issue here, so I thought this was a good experiment for me being new to this universe, and this random special that should have been an easy jumping on point, an easy one shot for somebody to read. And I will say it was. They didn't go into too much detail about each of the characters involved here, but there was enough to get you to understand what was going on, get the flavor of what each character was about. And if you were interested, you could always go to your comic shop or the newsstand and pick up another issue that they advertised in the back for each of these characters. But each of these stories, a la maybe like a Justice Society story, focuses on one set of titles that the Impact universe had at the time. And it starts out with the Web. And the Web, I guess, is their version of S.H.I.E.L.D., where they're the organization that knows everything that's going on, or maybe they're more like Checkmate in the DC universe. I'm not sure, but they seem to be the ones that the Secret Service agents contact, because Indigo, and here's another thing that I would be interested to look up, is Indigo an old Archie villain for these characters that were, I guess they were in the Crusaders, and I'm guessing these are a new generation of these characters. So I'd be interested to see if Indigo was like their main bad guy. But apparently, the way they describe it, Indigo was an old villain. He actually took over the entire Eastern Seaboard at one time. Again, I don't know if that's a reference to an old Archie story. Who knows? That would be interesting if Mark Waid, of all people, would do something like that. And he used to have a group of scientists that would be with him that they were called the Magi, apparently. And they rebelled against him, turned state's evidence on him, and that's how Indigo got captured by the Crusaders and law enforcement and was sentenced to life in prison. Well, Indigo escaped, and he's ransoming the president by saying, I want my old cohorts to be gathered on the White House lawn within 48 hours, or I kill the president. So the Secret Service agents contact the Web so that they could contact all these superheroes to go find these scientists that are now retired and in witness protection, or they're in hiding. And the Web knows where they are. They just need to send the superheroes out to get them. And one of these scientists works for the Web as a robotics expert. And he is confronted by the leader of the Web. And he says, I tried to redeem myself for what I did with Indigo back in the day by joining this team and using my knowledge for good. But if this is what I have to do, I'll do it for my country. I'll give myself up and go to the White House. So there's no fight with this scientist. He gets delivered to the White House by a member of Web. Oh, and I guess I should say on the cover, now that you know that the Norwegian Boys Choir were a bunch of robots, on the cover, each of the Impact superheroes is fighting a multitude of these robots with, children's heads. So the shield is prominently displayed along with a member of the Web. And in the background, you see the other characters fighting off these robots. So that is what's going on the cover. So the Web starts to incorporate the other heroes and send them to areas around the country to try to find these scientists and bring them in. So the Comet is the next superhero who has to go to Santa City in a story called Miracle on Farm Road 139. Oh, and I should tell you who did the Web story. Sorry about that. I did not write that in my credits here. So the web, each of these stories is done, I think, by the creator that did the actual comics. The web story was done by Len Strazewski with art by penciler Tom Artis and inker Bill Ray. The comet story was done by Mark Waid as a co-plotter doing the script, and Tom Lyle doing the co-plot and the breakdowns, with the pencils and the inks by Scott Hanna, no relation to me. So the person who runs Santa City is a cybernetic genius, and it's almost like the Simpsons episode where they go to was it Duff World, or where all the animatronics go nuts and they capture the Simpsons, and it's a small world, and Itchy and Scratchy go crazy in the parade, or whatever it was. And probably all of us as kids, as we made our own comics, we probably had our characters at Disneyland or some theme park and had the animatronics go wild. At least I know I did. I had the animatronics go wild and attack the superheroes. And so this seemed like a page out of something I would have done as a kid,
Yeah.
which I love this part here. And the scientist there, he actually has human elves, humans dressed as elves. So he sends them out to attack Comet as all the animatronics start attacking him also. And what was great was the band of elves is called the Holiday Commandos, as a riff on the Howling Commandos, as they run out with their guns ablazing. And the head commando kind of talks like a Nick Fury would have talked. Come on, you yahoos, let's go. The comic confronts the scientist who is the Santa behind Santa City. And again, just like the other scientist, he's willing to go. He doesn't put up a fight. Once he realizes that the comet isn't lackey of Indigo, that he's working for the government to try to help the president, he goes along with the comet. And just to let you know, that's pretty much how all the scientists are. It's that misunderstanding that's famous in comics. They think that the superheroes, because the superheroes are relatively new to the world. Impact Comics is only maybe 6 months old. So in their universe, the superheroes are new, so not everybody knows who they are. And all the scientists think that they're henchmen of Indigo, and then when that's all worked out, they go quietly to the White House. The next story is The Shield, and that story is by Grant Mime. I know I'm not pronouncing his name right, but the person who did the cover, so I guess he is the Shield he was the Shield writer and artist. He did the story and the art. Mark Waid did the words. So it was a team up between the two of them. And this story was called Immaculate Deception. And apparently the Shield is wanted by the law, but due to the circumstances, the web has arranged for him to have 24-hour immunity. So I guess maybe if you were a little curious about that, you would go pick up the Shield comic books to find out, well, why is this Captain America trope being hounded by the police and wanted by the law? They don't explain it, but they drop that in there. So he's dropped off in the Florida Keys to find another member of another scientist. And this one is using mirages and such to fool with his senses. And once he sees through that, he grabs the guy and brings him on in. The next story is The Fly. Now, The Fly, out of all of these characters, seemed like the one I would be most interested in checking out. The Fly is written by Len Strazewski again, with art by Mike Parobeck. Now, didn't he do a DC comic? That name sounds so familiar to me. Mike Parobeck.
I wonder if it was that Justice Society miniseries that.
That's it. That's it. The first time they appeared after Crisis.
I'll take your word for that.
Okay, but I think you're right. Now that you mention it, this is looking exactly like that. And the inker was Paul Frick. So I guess The Fly has it's almost like a Shazam situation where a young kid, instead of saying Shazam, he's got a device that turns him into an old, I guess, a teenager, and it puts him in the Fly costume. Mm-hmm. So I don't know what the deal is there. And there's also a deal with the kid's grandfather, which I think is a mystery that carries over into the Fly comic books. So, I mean, it's not it's not addressed here what the mystery is, but it looks like he has ties to the web. But I don't know what those ties are. Maybe he winds up being an older superhero or something like that. But here's another situation where I could swear I wrote, and attempted to draw a comic like this, where in this case, the person that they're looking for is a game developer. And because he thinks that the Fly is associated with Indigo, the villain, he fights the Fly off and pushes him into a room. And the room is basically a video game come to life. And the only way the Fly survives is because he likes video games and he can outmaneuver all the different types of characters that attack him. And again, I could swear I wrote something like this when I was a kid, where the superhero gets caught in a video game. He escapes and he explains himself, and he and the grandfather talk to the scientist, and the scientist goes with the Fly to go to the White House. The one character who does not appear outside of this little story in here is the Black Hood. Now, the Black Hood is the dark character of the Impact universe. I guess kind of Punisher-like, if you were to try and find a connection to somebody in a mainstream, the Marvel or the DC universe. And I've got to say that the print in here is it's kind of smudged together that on this newsprint that I can't tell you who did it. I'm sorry, I can't read it. These old eyes, I can't read it, and I apologize for that. But the Black Hood goes to get his scientist, and his scientist is apparently now a robot. Maybe he died previously, and his wife put his consciousness into a robot. But in the end, what the Black Hood winds up doing is destroying the robot. So that scientist is out. He's off the table. And the only reason the Black Hood even participated is because the people at the web had something he wanted, a password for something. That part, I think, was left ambiguous because they want you to read the Black Hood. So the Black Hood basically winds up killing the scientist. Now we move on to the Jaguar. The Jaguar story is written by, oh God, did they put it? Oh, here it is. William Mesner Loebs, with Sandra Chang on pencils and Mike Chen as the inker. Now, her scientist happens to be a person who developed the ability to use a transporter, like on Star Trek. I think you've heard of that show before, right? Star Trek. Haven't you heard of that?
I might have. Yeah.
Yeah. They use a so she transports. So what she did was when she left Indigo, she was wandering around. She didn't know what the heck to do. She was almost like a hitchhiker or something like that. And she came across this town, and it was a town that was pretty much going through bankruptcy. And but they were very friendly to her and took her in, even though they had nothing. And these people were all destitute. So she used her abilities with her transporting capabilities, these machines that she had. She was able to adjust her machinery to not only be able to transport people places, but she was able to transport energy and be able to use it to heat people's houses, provide them with electricity. So she actually brought the town back from being bankrupt to a very prosperous little town. Nobody in the town needs to drive cars anymore because they can transport wherever they want to. They can get their groceries, whatever they need. So she has made this town into a little utopia for the people there. So Jaguar walks into a diner. She notices there are no cars in the parking lot. There are a ton of people in there. And when she asks the waitress if she's ever seen this woman before, she has a picture of the woman. All of a sudden, everybody in the diner disappears. She goes out of her civilian garb into her Jaguar garb, which is very easy because I think it's mystical. So she just like snaps a finger and she becomes Jaguar. And all of a sudden, people start teleporting in to attack her. And as she fights them and people are teleporting in and out, she goes along with somebody and gets teleported with them. And she gets teleported into the kitchen of the scientist. And the scientist gives her story about how she helped the town. And she's willing to go with Jaguar. All the heroes assemble on the White House lawn with all of their scientists. and they use the power of one of the scientists to camouflage the heroes to look like the scientists to go out onto the White House lawn without the Secret Service knowing what they're doing. The heroes disguised as the scientists go out on the White House lawn, and they are transported up to a rocket ship that Indigo has rebuilt, an old rocket ship that he has rebuilt. He has the president trapped in there. And they say, okay, we're here, let the president go. And he goes, oh, no, I'm not letting the president go. The president is a great diplomat. What we're going to do, now that you are all here back with me, is we are going to take this rocket ship into the cosmos because Earth isn't worth our time. We're going to go take over the cosmos. My genius and your scientific capabilities together with the president's diplomatic skills, we will be able to take over planets throughout the universe. And I see your face as we're doing this here.
Which president was this?
H.W. Bush. Bush the senior.
Uh-huh. Okay.
Okay. So instead of all the scientists and all the heroes thought that Indigo wanted to get his revenge on all these scientists and kill them, it turns out he wanted to get the band back together and go out and take over other worlds, using the president as a diplomatic tool to get an in on these planets. So of course the heroes reveal themselves. They fight Indigo. The comet, it turns out that the ship, as good as Indigo is, the ship is an older rocket that basically Indigo put together with spit and bubblegum and duct tape. So things are starting to pop and explode as the rocket's getting ready to blast off. Oh, Comet flies out to try to at least keep the rocket grounded and not take off and not get that plume of energy that not only will shoot it into space, but probably will blow it up. And he is unsuccessful, unfortunately. But the heroes are able to use the teleporting device to get them off of the ship with the president. And they wanted to get Indigo to go with them. And he goes, nope, this ship is going to make it. I'm a genius. This ship is going to go to space. And of course it explodes with him on it. Or, who knows, maybe he comes back in some other comic. You never know. But he apparently died with the ship. And the president gives all of the heroes medals, and they go off on their separate ways. And that is a Christmas comic in the Impact universe.
So I looked this up, George, just to clarify. So the Impact comic line that began in 91 and ended in 93.
And so you're doing the research I should have done, but I did not.
It was the third attempt to revive the old Archie heroes after the Mighty Comics line of the 1960s, which is where I think I am more familiar with those characters, and the Red Circle line of comics in the early 1980s.
So that makes sense because this is early 90s. So yeah, Red Circle came first.
And I don't think we've seen these characters since then from any major publisher.
No, I think you're right. Yeah.
Unless Archie's done something since then that I'm not familiar with.
Now, this is a standalone thing for a person who is not familiar with any of these characters whatsoever. This was a very enjoyable read. I think anybody can pick this up, have fun with it. You may not know some of the references that the heroes make to their own journeys within their own titles, but that's fine. And if you're curious enough, you could have gone to pick them up. But this on its own, I was very satisfied with this story. And now I know what it's like when somebody who has no knowledge of characters, when they pick up a comic, because of course I don't remember that. I used to do that when I was a kid, but now I know all these characters. Even if I pick up an old, a comic from 30, 40 years ago. The thing is, it's nice to be able to pick something up with established characters that you've never read before, you know nothing about them, and be able to enjoy the one-shot story.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that was good. And again, okay, maybe Christmas adjacent because the only thing was the president was lighting the Christmas tree. There are some hints about holidays and it being December and around Christmas Eve within each of the short stories, which, they really had nothing to do with the plot of their little short story. But all in all, a very enjoyable winter special. And for all you comic fans out there, just to put in perspective of when this is, there's a full-page ad for Armageddon, the Alien Agenda, with Monarch in the Old West. He wants to gun down mankind's last hope. I'm going to show the ad to Eric. I know he remembers this ad.
Oh, yeah.
Because I remember this ad. So a lot of things coming back to me with some of these house ads here.
Yeah, we don't talk about the Monarch.
Yeah, no.
and that whole time period during DC Comics. Not with me anyway.
There was it in this one? Oh no, I'm not going to get into that here. I heard as of the recording of this, the last episode you and Peter recorded of the Legion Project podcast, where you talked about Censor Girl.
Mm-hmm.
And finally the big reveal, because I had no idea, because I didn't read those comics. So I was following along with you, waiting very patiently for you to get to these issues. And how you talked about how the Crisis on Infinite Earths actually influenced the Censor Girl mystery.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not going to say anything about it here, obviously, folks go listen to that. But, and where was I going with this? What were we just talking about before this? Because it seems like, oh man. Now, the whole Armageddon thing. Monarch's identity was also switched, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Not because of Crisis, but for other reasons. So it's interesting to find all that stuff out in hindsight, because I always thought the identity of Monarch was a little weird when it was revealed. I was like, wow, that's kind of strange. And then years later to find out who it was supposed to be.
Right.
It's like, wow, that makes a lot more sense that way. So in today's world, I am waiting for whatever Tomorrow's or whatever publisher is going to be out there to put the history out of what's going on at DC for the past 5 or so years, what things were supposed to be. I'm going to be and I know that's a total tangent, but when we find those things out, I'm going to be very, very interested, because I know what's going on. I mean, forget what's going on right now. What went on for the past 2 or 3 years with things like Doomsday Clock, the Three Jokers, some of the other like Rebirth related things. I mean, maybe even Heroes in Crisis. I'm not sure, but it seems like things were changed. I mean, we know that the whole generation, whatever it was called, Generation 1 or whatever. I'm just interested to find out what the real plan was. And I know nobody can really talk about it now because it might take attention away from what's going on currently. But I want that historical perspective someday, whether it be a back issue magazine 20 years from now. I don't want to wait 20 years, but I want somebody to write the book, talk about it when they're the do not talk about clause in their contract is over. I need a book. I need somebody to talk about it on a talk show. I need somebody to come on my podcast or your podcast. I need to know, because I have the feeling whatever was planned is a lot better than what we actually saw.
Well, if you don't mind, George, I'll take that and turn it into a segue.
Yes, please.
Because it's interesting you say that now, because in thinking about my next Christmas comic, I was curious as to the history and why Joe Staton adapted A Christmas Carol, Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol.
Oh,
and so
nice.
that's my next book, which is from the Classics Illustrated line of comics. And I'm sure you're familiar with the Classics Illustrated.
I am, and in fact, I know I've seen that cover before.
Yeah,
that's not a Joe Staton cover.
No cover.
Okay.
So let me give you the full lineup here. Joe Staton. It says on the cover, Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol, adapted by Joe Staton, with Les Dorscheid, Willie Schubert, and the cover is by Gary Gianni, which is one of the reasons why I wanted to talk about this, and I love this book. That painted cover, well, it looks painted to me by Mr. Gianni, is just gorgeous. And
I would love that framed in my house.
Yeah, it's kind of bad because the logo of the Classics Illustrated and the title of the comic is in this kind of takes up about almost half of the left-hand corner, but it's almost half of the whole top part of the comic too.
Yeah.
And it's covering up vital cover space, of this illustration.
Obscuring a little bit of the picture.
Yeah. And what it is depicting Scrooge's encounter with the Ghost of Christmas Present.
Mm-hmm.
And with the wreaths and the scepter of the spirit and the feast at the feet of
hold that up again. I know the listeners can't
I know
see
it's so good.
But man, that is a beautiful cover. Okay, so I know you're going to get into it, but how old is this?
So this came out in. Oh wow, I didn't write it down. This came out in 1990 something. 1990, yeah.
When we were going over what we were going to talk about, when you said this was a Classics Illustrated comic, I really thought it was going to be an older Classics Illustrated.
Yeah, yeah.
But this one is great. I didn't even realize that there was a comeback in the 90s. So I guess that there were more Classics Illustrated done by more modern artists in the 90s. I didn't realize that.
Yeah, and I actually picked this up at what was the name of the bookstore? Was it a Walden Books that we had in the mall where I live? It's obviously no longer there now.
Yeah,
but
unfortunately.
they I'll say a few years before they closed up shop, they started getting in trades and sometimes even just single issue comic books. And I went in one time and they had this Classics Illustrated of one of my very favorite, if not my favorite, Christmas story. A Christmas Carol is something we were talking about. You mentioned Christmas movies earlier. A Christmas Carol is my absolute favorite movie to watch at Christmas time.
And I know you've mentioned that every year, but I forgot, what version is your favorite?
And that's the Patrick Stewart version is my absolute favorite. But I will watch all different kinds of adaptations of this story. There's been so many over the years, but I just I finally I saw this comic in that Walden Books over the course of a couple years, and then I finally just decided to get it one year, just to have it. I just wanted to have it. I mean, it's a lovely. I mean, everybody knows the story, or they should, right? It's Ebenezer Scrooge. He's an old miser. Eric Scrooge. He's not a great guy. He doesn't like Christmas. He doesn't care for his fellow man.
He doesn't want his pocket picked once a year.
Yes, exactly. But then, because of his old partner Jacob Marley, he's offered this chance at redemption, at absolution. And to do that, he of course is visited by the ghost of Christmas past, present, and future, and of course he ends up with a change of heart. And as they say towards the end of the book, Scrooge knew how to keep Christmas well, and ends up being a benefactor to Bob Cratchit, his employee, and Bob Cratchit's family, including Tiny Tim, and those of course in the great city in which he lives. So, I mean, that's the story. Like I said, it's the Christmas story. Aside from perhaps the Nativity, it is the Christmas story to me. That might be sacrilegious to some, but but like I said, what I really like about this, it's very fanciful. Oh wait, let me see. Charles Dickens here. I got to get to the page. Hold on. There it is. So it says here in this kind of introduction to the text, it says Charles Dickens was greatly enamored of Christmas, and the holiday season was one of his favorite settings. And they give a little bit of history as far as his publishing works, what led up to A Christmas Carol, which was published in 1843. He meant his Christmas stories not just to cheer, but to haunt, which explains the spirits. Dickens described them as a whimsical sort of mask intended to waken loving and forbearing thoughts. And they also say, although critical reception was mixed, A Christmas Carol quickly won the hearts of readers and reestablished Dickens' literary standing. Basically, A Christmas Carol by Dickens is what redefined what Christmas was to then the modern audience, and continues to this day. We think of Christmas being a time of celebration and getting together with friends, playing games, having a feast. I mean, that, as I understand it, before the popularity of this story, Christmas was not so much that. It was more of a somber affair, at least in England, perhaps. And maybe I'm speaking out of turn. So if anybody who comes from that part of the world knows.
Well, no, I think you're right. Although the special I saw would probably more be the 1600s than the 1800s. But I just saw a special about a Tudor Christmas. And you're right. A lot of the, when you try to trace back some of the traditions that we use in modern day today to what they were 100, 200, 400 years ago, whatever, when you see the origins of some of the things and how they've evolved over time, at least in the 1600s, in this show I was watching, you're right. A lot of the things had a summer feel to them.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, even in here it says that Dickens, the holiday was a time not only for joyous celebration, but for personal reflection. Yeah, maybe we all could use a little bit more of that these days.
Yeah.
but anyway, besides the impact of this the story as a whole on Christmas time and what we think of as Christmas, like I said, the story itself, it's, besides the fact that what it does is it proves to you, showing you through what happens to Scrooge, that we're all capable of being more than we allow ourselves to be.
Right.
And if we just open up our hearts and help others, and because that's I'm going through this with my teenage granddaughters right now, right? They're looking forward to Christmas. Why are they looking forward to Christmas? Well, because they get presents.
Of course.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody loves to get presents. I'm not dissing that, but as I get older, I find myself more and more drawn towards this idea of the gift shouldn't be things. The gift should be of of yourself, of what you contribute, of you helping your fellow man, and giving to others and not expecting anything in return, right? I mean, that's what we were taught. Even us old fogies like us, George, we were taught. It's about giving, not receiving, right?
Yep.
And so I don't know. I'm for some reason, as I'm closing in on my my remaining time on Earth, I'm feeling maybe a little bit more like Scrooge than Tiny Tim these days. Perhaps maybe that's I'm seeing the spirits now instead of.
Well, I hope you only see the ones from Christmas past and Christmas present.
Yeah, but yeah, it's that's why I love this story so much. And
well, how's the artwork in there?
Well, I was just gonna say the adaptation. Joe Staton. I know Joe Staton more for his work on Green Lantern than probably anything else. In fact, one of the first comic book, maybe even the first comic book miniseries I ever got was a Green Lantern miniseries. Was that drawn by Joe Staton? Anyway, I'm getting my early comics confused, but I do know that I read some Joe Staton Green Lantern stuff. I think here I'll just show George here on the. Here's that scene with Ghost of Christmas Present with the big guy in his green robe. I would say this is a pretty faithful adaptation to the story that we all know, even down to the dialogue. Knowing the dialogue as well as I do from watching the movie each and every year, especially the Patrick Stewart one, which is pretty close to the actual text. what he did, though, which I found very interesting, I have to find it again. I just had it, but it just slipped out of my hand, is his depiction of the ghost of Christmas past. I'll just show George here in the video. Can you see that? Can you see that, George?
Yeah, I'm trying to make out. So what would you think? That's more of at the time, more of like a modern, like what is she wearing? I'm trying.
It's hard. It kind of looks like a blouse made out of, I don't know, flowers or plants or something.
It's hard to tell.
I can't tell. But what it reminds me of is kind of like a sprite or a nymph, kind of like a fairy type character, which you don't really see in like the movie or television versions of this story. So I thought that was a really nice change or contribution to the story that is beyond what we normally see, because the Ghost of Christmas Present is, the big jovial guy like we normally see, who becomes more gaunt as time goes on because he's dying. The Ghost of Christmas Future is the same tall, robed, dark figure that we always get. So, like I said, a faithful adaptation, with a few minor tweaks, I think, that Joe Staton put in there just for a little bit of flair, a little bit of difference. Yeah. So, but yeah, it was a nice little story. I hadn't read this in a very, very long time, so it was nice to dig this out and read through it again, in preparation for my marathon of A Christmas Carol adaptations, the movies that I'll be watching here pretty soon.
Do you? I'm trying to recall. Do you listen to the Patrick Stewart one-man show from Broadway every year? Didn't you say you do that?
I do have the audio play, or I don't know if play is the right word, but his monologue. I do have that. Actually, I have 2 copies of that, George, because I messed up and bought it twice.
Nothing wrong with that. I seem to recall you saying that.
Yeah, I do try to listen to that. I also listen to the Neil Gaiman.
Now that I haven't heard
of his reading of the book. Oh. So that's wonderful, as well.
Nice. I haven't heard that. Maybe I'll put that on the list this year. The Patrick Stewart one-man show audio is required listening in December every year for me.
Oh, good. Yeah, great.
Yeah, the second disc, what Patrick Stewart did, I think I say this every year when we do the show, but it's worth mentioning again. The way he lets you know that the bell is ringing for the next hour. He goes, gadong, gadong.
That's
and
right.
To this day, it could be July. And for some reason, if we're waiting for something to happen, it's like gadong. We'll just say it. So it made that kind of an impression on us. All right. Now, after dragging you and your listeners through 2 Christmas adjacent books, I decided what I would do is I would give us all a break. And instead of having some sort of a long superhero story with a bunch of anthological stories within it, I would get something from my youth that I think we could all enjoy. And just like A Christmas Carol will take you back to when you were a kid, when maybe you first read A Christmas Carol, I have a comic here that brings me back to when I was a kid. And this, I think, is the first year where I don't have a Marvel comic in my list. Because basically Impact being published by DC, I just had 2 DC comics with the House of Mystery and Impact. So this here is from 1975. Dennis the Menace Christmas Special. Now, back in the day when I was a kid, I remember the Dennis the Menace comics popping up on the shelves. And as much as I liked Harvey Comics with Richie Rich and Casper and Baby Huey and Wendy and whoever, there were also comics that, and of course you had the Archie comics, but every once in a while there'd be a Dennis the Menace on there. And what was great about the Dennis the Menace comics was Maybe it was a monthly title, and there were these specials, like this Christmas special here. But like Dennis the Menace would go to London, or he'd go to the Olympics, or he'd go to Washington D.C., and it would be Hank Ketcham or his cast of artists, his ghost artists, would actually have a whole comic based on the travels of Dennis the Menace. If Dennis the Menace was in London, he was just getting into mischief at all the different places in London. And if he went to Washington, D.C., getting into mischief there. And it was interesting as a kid to read about these places where I hadn't been before and to learn a little bit about it. So these Dennis the Menace books do hold a special place in my heart. I'm not going to say I enjoyed them more than a Harvey or an Archie comic. But when they popped up, they were special because it just seemed like there was something more going on in there than your average stories that I was reading as a kid. And I think maybe the first year we did this, I had a couple of bonus also rans or something like that. And one of them was a Little Jinx holiday special. And this is no different than any Archie comic or Richie Rich, where it's just a bunch of different stories. They're not tied together by anything except Christmas, and they were a lot of fun. The Holly and the Ivy is just a story about somebody sent Dennis the Menace's family, the Mitchells, Holly and Ivy. And I never knew this, believe it or not, but apparently the Holly represents the male and the Ivy represents the female, and whichever one of them came into the house first, whether it was the Holly or the Ivy, that would determine who ruled the house for the next year. Very antiquated, very, very weird thing.
Yeah.
I don't even know if it's a real thing, but somebody sent them Holly and Ivy. Dennis gets it from the mailman, brings them both in at the same time, and Mr. and Mrs. Mitchell are arguing over who is going to rule the house over the course of the next year. And then it is determined that Dennis doesn't like to see his parents arguing, so he says, the Holly says you're the boss, right, Dad? Yes. And the Ivy says you're the boss, right, Mom? Yes. Well, what does this mistletoe say? And Mom and Dad kiss each other, and there's another Christmas legend, that a little child shall lead them. So Dennis the Menace saves the day, has a little halo on his head as he walks off at the end of that story. But I never heard of that before. That's the Holly and the Ivy. I guess it's something from, shall we say, the old days?
I just looked this up, George, and it was the third time that stuff you're mentioning. I had to go to the internet to find out more.
You're doing all the research I should have done prior to this episode, and I did not.
It says, in pagan times, Holly was thought to be a male plant and Ivy a female plant. Okay. An old tradition from the Midlands of England says that whatever one was brought into the house first over winter tells you whether the man or woman of the house would rule that year. But it was unlucky to bring either into a house before Christmas Eve.
Okay, they don't mention that. They just mention what all the chores will be if each one has the other one ruling the house. So that's interesting. In between stories, they have, you know how Dennis the Menace in the newspaper is a one-panel strip. So what they would have is, I guess, maybe Dennis the Menace cartoons that appeared in newspapers, maybe the year prior or something like that. So they had a couple of one-panel gags that I guess appeared in previous times. The next story is called In the Saint Nick of Time. And Joey comes over to visit Dennis just as Dad is finishing reading Dennis A Visit from St. Nicholas. Oh, remember before, earlier in the show, bring it full circle? I do have it here. Visit from St. Nicholas by Clement Seymour. And on one side of the panel, as the story goes on, it's the actual text of the poem. On the other side of the panel is Dennis reading the poem in his own way, his interpretation, because he can't really read. He's remembering what his father told him as he had just read it to him. As he's telling Joey the story about Santa Claus, the visit from St. Nicholas. And of course, as Dennis is butchering the story in his own way, but kind of getting it right just in a kid way, Joey is countering, asking questions about what Dennis is saying. and misunderstanding things or not understanding how can Santa do this? What are you talking about with sugar plums? I'd rather have a caramel apple, things like that. So it's just going back and forth. And Joey doesn't understand how Santa can go back up the chimney. So he tries to go up the chimney and he gets covered in soot. And that's when Mr. and Mrs. Mitchell come back into the room and they blame Dennis for getting Joey all dirty. But it really wasn't Dennis's fault, but he is a menace. So, of course, they blame him for it. And Joey leaves. And again, you could see Dennis's dad is mad at him for getting Joey all dirty. So that was that story. And again, in between stories, more of these one panel gags that were probably appearing in newspapers. The last story is called Trees for All. And Margaret, if you remember Margaret, the character Margaret, she comes over to Dennis's house and she made a couple of Christmas ornaments. And of course, Dennis doesn't necessarily like Margaret that much. The local pastor happens to be at the house talking with Mr. Mitchell. And he hears Dennis talking to Margaret about all of her ornaments that she made that look like animals. And Dennis says something like, you should make some dogs and cats and decorate a tree for the pet shop. And then Margaret counters with, well, maybe I should make some angel ornaments like in the carol, Hark the Herald Angels Sing. So Dennis goes, yeah, that would make a nice tree for the newspaper office since they're called the Herald. So his dad and the pastor come in and they go, Dennis, the minister heard what you just said, and he thinks it's a great idea. And Dennis goes, well, what did I say? And he goes, well, we're trying to figure out a way to boost our donations this year. And we're thinking that maybe if we made a tree for the newspaper, they'll buy it from us, and that money would be a donation to the church. So they start talking about how many of these other trees can we do for these specific businesses around town, and then they'll buy the tree from us, and the purchase will be a donation to the church. So the entire story is them going to different businesses with different themed trees and the kids singing carols as they're shaking down the local businesses for donations to the church. And Dennis's father is really giving them the shakedown. So they go to the newspaper, they go to a pet store, they go to a music store, they go to a toy store, and each one has a theme to it. And the carol that they sing has to do with the tree or the store they're in. For instance, they're in a ladies' dress shop, and the kids are singing, Don, we now are gay apparel, fa la 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 la, the apparel. And every time they go into a store, there's a pun that has to do with the tree. So while the kids are in the ladies' dress shop, and the ornaments on the tree are men and women dressed up in their holiday garb, the priest is saying to the shop owner, if I may say so, this tree really dresses up your place. So you can kind of see how that goes. Or they're in the music store and the tree has the little drummer boy all over the tree. And of course the kids are singing Little Drummer Boy. And Dennis's father says, this ought to help you drum up business, eh? And the store owner says, doesn't hurt to blow one's own horn. And it goes on like that. And that's the story. Basically, these little puns, the different carols being tied to a different type of store. And then that's the end of the story. And then we go into more of these one-page gags that appeared in the newspaper. There's a letters page with how a school in Florida uses Dennis the Menace comic to help people read. So I thought that was kind of interesting. And the last bit of the book, and I can't believe that this is still in the book. It says, Happy Birthday, USA. Now remember, this came out in 1975, holidays 1975. So 1976 was going to be a bicentennial year.
Right.
It says, let's make 1976 a Yankee Doodle year with your Dennis calendar. Just cut out the following calendar pages in the order they appear in the book, staple the pages together at the top, celebrate our country's birthday all through June, then turn the calendar over for July and the rest of the Yankee Doodle year with Dennis. So each page is a page of the calendar. And they're still in the book. I didn't rip them out, or if I'm the one who bought this book. So yeah, I didn't rip them out, which I never really did. So the last page is July 1976 with Dennis with sparklers and an Uncle Sam hat. But that's how the book ended to prepare everybody for the bicentennial year that was coming after the new year. And that is the Dennis the Menace Christmas special from 1975. And it's labeled Dennis the Menace Bonus Magazine Series, and it was put out by Fawcett. 35 cents.
Well, I don't know how much my final entry into this Gab Bag went for. But
you know what? Talking about prices, I did say that the House of Mystery was $1. This was 35 cents in 1975. So just again, to keep things in perspective, in 1991, the Impact Winter Special was $2.50.
Well, I can only imagine mine was maybe a dime, if that. Because this is actually a story from 1940. This is Superman's Christmas Adventure.
Okay, this one has to be our oldest. I might not have been right about our newest, but this has to be our oldest.
I think you're right.
Yeah,
because I wrote down my entries for the last 4 years, and I don't have years on some of them, but I know that they were definitely older than or newer than this one.
Okay.
But yeah, this was actually in the DC Universe Christmas trade from the year 2000. But it's a story, from what I can tell, was a standalone comic that was published in 1940. This is by Jerry Siegel, Jack Burnley, and it's said in the table of contents of the trade here that the original colorist and letterer's unknown. So, and there are no names listed in the actual 1940 reprint here. But it's it's nice art. It's what you think of as classic, early Superman art. But basically what this is, what Superman's Christmas Adventure is. So, George, when I made my notes for this,
okay,
I wrote down just a brief synopsis of the story, just to have, just keep that in my head, what each issue was about, right? The first two that I talked about was, a few lines across the page that I typed, right? Just a few lines.
All right.
Well, I guess the Daredevil one was a good paragraph of description, right?
Yeah.
Superman's Christmas Adventure, and I'm not going to read through this, but to get every bit of the plot down, it took over half a page for me to write out what the story is about, because this is a 15-page story, and there's so much stuff in it. And boy, whether this was a nickel or a dime or whatever, you got your money's worth in Superman's Christmas Adventure.
Did they provide in that book? Did they provide what the cover would have been?
No. Oh. I had to go find that one out. But I think it's just Superman on the cover, maybe with Santa. I forget now. But I do recall that they had in the bottom right corner was this square, this blank square that. Because they would apparently they printed these comics out, printed them up to give, or at least sell to, various stores, and then the store would put in a little Christmas message, or at least their logo or something, so that I would assume they sold them within their stores or gave them out to Christmas shoppers.
So whether it be like a rubber stamp or a sticker or something, they put something there.
I would imagine it would probably be a stamp or something.
Yeah.
So, great little, tie-in, little sales gimmick. So, but
cool. But I love stuff like that.
Yeah, but the story itself is just it's such golden age hijinks.
So, but we love it, don't we? We love golden age hijinks.
This is my favorite of the three. I know how much I gushed about A Christmas Carol, but this was my favorite Christmas comic of these three this year. It's just so kooky and weird and schlocky and derivative, but it's Superman. I don't know. It's fun, but So to start off with, I'll just give you the lead into this this little caption box. It says Yuletide! Exclamation point. Period of gaiety and goodwill among men. It seems hardly possible that anyone could be so mean as to sabotage such a beloved event, but Dr. Grouch, gloomy killjoy that he is, plans to do just that. It remains for Superman to demonstrate that though scoundrels may seek to undermine all that Christmas signifies, the triumphant spirit of Christmas shall exist eternally. Okay, so I will try to briefly explain what this story is giving us here.
You don't know how much I can't wait for this. This is awesome. I'm glad you say this to last. This is great.
So Perry White sends Clark and Lois out to cover local department stores and wanting them to write a couple of feature stories on the activity and color on display there. So they go out and they encounter this young boy who's window shopping, staring longingly at a toy display in one of the department stores. And Lois remarks, "I'll bet you're happily looking forward to Christmas and all the toys you'll get." And the boy responds, putting her in her place, "My mom and dad are poor. The closest I ever get to toys is when I look at them through store windows." I shouldn't laugh. I mean, that's it's not a laughing matter, but it's just the way, it's just so ham-handed, and again, kooky golden age, George. Clark then replies, "You say your name is Billy Connolly and you live on Drake Street? I'll see that Santa doesn't forget you." That doesn't sound weird at all, right? Anyway, so Lois and Clark go back to Perry, and Clark has this brilliant idea of doing a huge campaign. Readers will be asked to donate old toys. We'll repair them and distribute them to poor kids on Christmas Day. And Perry says, "It does sound good. Get to work at once." And at the North Pole a few days later, Santa is reading the Daily Planet, because of course he does.
Well, he has to have a subscription to all major newspapers.
Especially the Daily Planet.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a couple of new helpers in Clark Kent and Lois Lane. That's fine, he says.
That's just fine.
Clark then is walking along and happens to become a peeping Tom and peers into this rich kid's house, discovers that he's not appreciative of the toys that he does have, decides to kidnap the boy that night and take him around town to ogle at the poor, and in the attempt to show what was his name, Master James, that you should appreciate what you got, and maybe help out your fellow kids or something.
Why does this? I'm getting a little deja vu that one of our previous Gab Bag comics, Superman kidnapped a kid also.
I think that was one of the first ones that I talked about.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, right? See? It's a through line with Superman.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you would think, George, that's the thrust of this story.
Mm-hmm.
So this kid is going to learn the true meaning of Christmas and help out young Billy and Mary and the other kids that they encounter. But no, the story takes a turn.
Oh my!
Because as they mentioned, Mr. Grouchy or Grouch or whatever. So Dr. Grouch and his crony Mr. Meanie arrive at the North Pole.
I'm getting another cup of cocoa because this is a fireside chat story if I've ever heard one. This is awesome.
It's so bizarre.
Yes.
They arrive at the North Pole in a spaceship. So Mr. Meanie says to Dr. Grouch, "We never enjoyed Christmas when we were children. Why should the kids of today have a good time?"
Well, the guy's got a point.
Dr. Grouch replies, "Certainly, we'll talk Santa Claus out of this silly business of making and giving away toys." You know, nothing like a couple of old white guys telling people not to have fun.
Right.
Right. Anyway, so they go...
How little things have changed over the...
Yeah, exactly. This seems so alien these days, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, Dr. Grouch goes in and introduces himself to Santa, and they basically say, "Hey, we believe your factories can have a better purpose than making toys for children. All this labor and equipment going into a lot of foolishness. You can make commercial products and we can sell them. What a business we'd have. We demand, he says to Santa Claus, we demand that you conform to our way of thinking."
Wow, businessmen were even evil in the 40s, huh?
Or suffer the consequences. Well, what's your answer?
Huh.
And of course, Santa's like, get out of here. And then sicks the elves on him, chases them away. So in retaliation, they decide not to attack Santa and his elves, but they're going to go... Their first blow in this master plan of theirs, whatever that is that they will strike at the Daily Planet's Department for Distributing Toys. That'll show Santa we're determined.
That's right. And it's probably the closest to the North Pole where something Christmassy is going on.
So they go to the Daily Planet. Lois and Clark are in the room repairing toys, I guess. And they come in. So, George, I already said, they have a spaceship.
Of course.
Right?
Yes.
They also have gas guns that knock out Lois and, Clark.
Mm-hmm.
And then they try to burn all the toys and leave, of course, as evil masterminds often do.
Yes.
Clark, of course, comes to, blows out the fire, and then pretends that he was gassed when Lois wakes up. Right. Lois decides, I love this. So, these guys assault them.
Yes.
They commit arson. And Lois says, "I recognize one of the mass marauders, Dr. Grouch. Oh, if I ever catch up with him again."
This out of okay, I'm not even going to talk about mine because obviously your three are better than my three. But out of your three, this is the best. I'm so riveted. People can't see this. I am sitting up in my seat. I am like leaning forward, and just anticipating every word that you're going to tell me about this story. This is awesome.
So next, they decide. Well, first of all, okay, spaceship. Gas guns, and I guess they must have a video or a means of seeing into the room through this special television. Either that, or they are Lois and Clark are broadcasting their toy repair work over the television. I don't know what it is, but all I know is that they can see into the room, see that their evil plan has failed, and decide, let's just go back to Santa Claus's toy shop and wreck it. So they get in their spaceship, fly to the North Pole again, gas some elves, start destroying the toys in the toy shop, discover that Lois Lane has stowed away on the spaceship, decide to, I guess, kill her by tying her to a giant, what do they call it? A giant skyrocket. I'll show Georgia. I mean, this comes right out of a Wile E. Coyote cartoon.
Oh, I love that. Oh, yes.
Right? It's a rocket that is basically larger than Lois. They've tied her to it, lit the fuse underneath it, go back in, start smashing up the place with axes. Santa gets wise to what's going on finally, and then uses the toys as a counterattack. He basically becomes the prankster in this moment, and the toys, the toy soldiers attack Dr. Grouch and Mr. Meanie, and they run away. So you would imagine this takes probably minimum 5, maybe 10 minutes, right? In the meantime, Lois apparently hasn't blasted off yet until the next page. And she's off streaking through the night on this rocket, yelling help. Clark, who says, Lois has been gone a long time. I wonder where she went. I have it. She must have gone after Grouch. It's time for Superman to act.
You think, Clark?
I don't know why he would think that, but
I know.
But then, so he's hurtling somewhere and sees Lois tied to the rocket, and then rescues her, of course, drops her off on top of the Daily Planet.
But how's the rocket? Is the rocket okay?
Apparently, it's still floating away.
Okay.
I don't.
All right, good. They'll bring that back in the next rebirth.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Some crafty writer will find that.
This sounds like a job for Tom King.
Yeah, maybe. Mm-hmm. But it'll just be raining and the rocket will be crying, and I'm tired of that.
So Superman leaves Lois on the roof of the Daily Planet. Dr. Grouch, the voyeur that he is looking through his ultra telescope and sees that she's on the Daily Planet roof. They go down, kidnap her again, or I guess kidnap her, and decide, okay, so their next trick is to kidnap Santa's reindeer.
Oh.
To prevent him from delivering the toys. So Santa realizes, well, actually he doesn't. One of the elves tells him, why not get the assistance of Superman? He's our last hope. And so over the radio airwaves, Santa calls for Superman to help. Fortunately, Clark Kent is in his car, happening to be listening to the radio, and hears Santa's plea. Superman flies to the North Pole, goes searching for Dr. Grouch and Mr. Meanie, find the truck with the reindeer in it, but Mr. Meanie turns the tables on them by gassing the reindeer, knocking them unconscious, as he says, "Ha! Gloom will pervade the universe after all." Santa says, "This is terrible. On Christmas Eve, no gifts delivered. Millions of children will be disappointed." Undismayed, Superman steps forward and says, "No time for delay. Quick, Santa, pile your gifts into the sleigh and climb in." Superman throws Mr. Meanie into the sleigh with the gifts, and he flies off with Santa in the sleigh, and he helps deliver presents to all the boys and girls across the world. Again, you would think the story would be done at this point. There's so much has happened here.
Yeah, but there are too many loose ends here. Too many loose ends.
Right? So while they're delivering the presents, Superman throws Mr. Meanie down Dr. Grouch's chimney, but then Santa turns the tables and goes into Dr. Grouch's house and delivers some presents to both men. Superman says, as we all are, thinking, "You're still going to leave them gifts despite all the harm they've done to you?" Santa, "Yes, it's the Christmas spirit. To forgive your foes. I'm sure there is some good in both Grouch and Meanie." The two old men come into the room, and Meanie says, We heard what you said, Santa. After all we did to you, you're still leaving us Christmas presents? Dr. Grouch, "I never thought people could be like that. They're the first presents we ever got." Dr. Grouch says to Santa, "If you'll shake my hand, I'll be the happiest man in the world. Mr. Meanie, we promise to be kind from now on. You've taught us plenty." Santa, "Put her there. Merry Christmas, boys." Dr. Grouch releases the captive Lois to tie up that loose end, George. Meanie and I want to apologize to you too, miss. Lois says, "No apologies are necessary. If you've got the true Christmas spirit, I'm satisfied."
Yeah, shooting me off in a rocket, that's fine.
No big.
No.
So Superman then flies Lois back to Metropolis, and then decides to stop in at Master James's house to see.
I forgot about that.
Right. Master James and his manservant are carrying presents, and James says, "I'm going to have a swell time distributing toys. You know what I've learned? It's more fun to give than to receive."
Ah.
And then the final panel, George. Oh, wait. At that panel, it says the end, but then there's another panel, the coda, I guess, Superman addressing us, breaking the fourth wall.
Okay.
"I hope all you readers will remember to be generous to those less fortunate than yourselves. And now, Merry Christmas to you and a Happy New Year."
All right, two things about that. Great telling, first of all. Great story. Okay, so two things. One, I wonder if this, you remember the big treasury-sized books that used to come out from Marvel and DC? And
yeah.
And there was a holiday one I remember from DC. I wonder if this is the Superman story in there. I don't know.
Oh, yeah, maybe.
But the other thing is, Dr. Grouch and Mr. Meanie, I mean, just shooting Lois off in a rocket is one thing. And Santa still gave them toys. I have a bone to pick with Santa because I didn't do anything near like that. And I still got coal when I was 8 years old.
See, this is the problem. You should have been more evil.
I think so.
And you would reap the rewards by turning a new leaf.
Yeah, so now I'm a little pissed is what I'm trying to say here. I'm not the most materialistic guy in the world, but
I mean, there's just
what's a guy got to do, not to get coal when you're 8 years old?
Well, you got to rip off other stories, right? I mean, because this is a Christmas Carol meets Rudolph meets I don't know, the Prince and the Pauper. I don't know. It's got so many tropes and homages to things. It's so bizarre.
And who would ever guess that 50 years later, half a century later, we'd have Lobo's Paramilitary Christmas? I mean, it's from the same company. Who would have ever guessed?
Speaking of selling stuff, there was a point in the story. This is one of the things I wrote down. Santa was telling Dr. Grouch and Mr. Meanie that Superman, quote, "novelties are very popular this year."
Uh-oh.
And so I was like, wait a minute, this is 1940. This is just a few short years after Superman's debut.
Right.
I do know that Superman, the nation, maybe perhaps the world, went a little Superman crazy, and in the first 5 or so years of when he was published. But was it Christmas 1940? And so I was doing a little research for it. I couldn't find anything definitive. But like I said, those early years were kind of a boon for merchandising for Superman, for DC Comics. So I was wondering, was this a descriptive part of the story or a prescriptive part of the story?
Mm-hmm.
It was the publisher trying to gin up some sales for something.
Well, who knows what ads accompanied this issue?
That's true. Yeah.
Right. So maybe
the bad thing about
ad. Yeah.
About getting, reading this in a trade format. I have no context for the time.
Mm-hmm.
So that'd be really cool to actually read that issue.
These older Christmas stories in a facsimile edition that they're doing, that would be pretty cool.
I would get that.
I would do that too, just if for no other reason the ads.
I mean, it would probably be, besides obviously, getting the story in among the trade collection that I have, that'd be the cheapest way to probably get that issue is to pay that $4 or $5 or whatever it will be.
And you held up that cover of that trade. I love that cover that looks like wrapping paper with all the DC characters on it. Yeah. I remember that cover.
With the bow and tag. Yeah. DC Universe Christmas. I love it too.
Yeah. Well, that was a great Gab Bag.
It was.
That was a lot of fun. I look forward to it. So now I already have the next year's in my head.
But you'll just change them the few days before we record next year.
Yeah, it got so good. I don't know why I confused myself and why I hate change as it is. I don't know why I changed my mind after 11 months, but I just started going crazy. But as a result, I picked up other holiday comics that I didn't even know existed, which I'm going to read this year. And then, of course, next year I'll probably wind up doing the same thing, like you just said.
Mm-hmm. Well, George, thank you for joining me on yet another Gab Bag.
No, thank you for inviting me back. This is great. 4 years in running, huh?
Yeah. We definitely have to do a fifth. We gotta reach that nice odd number.
Yeah, and me being a creature of habit, and I love tradition. Uh, I'm game every year if you are. There are so many Christmas comics out there. I don't think we're ever going to run out.
Well, I might eventually because the number of Christmas or holiday related comics, because I play a little more closer to the vest than you do
What do you mean?
with these choices.
What do you mean? I don't understand, Eric. What do you mean?
So we'll see. We'll see how far we can get with this.
Okay, all right.
But maybe that'll inspire me to buy some more Christmas related comic books. So
There are plenty out there, apparently.
yeah, or Christmas adjacent ones.
Yes, as I seem to be famous for on these episodes.
That's all good though.
Maybe I'll do my homework and I'll make sure that the stories are more Christmas-like, like that Superman story that you just described, as opposed to the House of Mystery that I had this year.
Mm-hmm.
Well, at least it wasn't like that Fantastic Four I had, where just a cover was Christmas.
That's right,
and the inside had nothing to do with Christmas. Somebody on Twitter had very recently posted some Jim Lee pages of the Fantastic Four, and one of the pages happened to be from that issue. And I was going to like retweet and say, "Hey, Eric, I specifically described this page in Christmas Gab Bag, whatever number it was." I said, no, that's a little too inside Twitter. I don't need to do that. Let's leave it to the people arguing politics and how the election went, as opposed to me trying to say, hey, look at this picture of the thing ripping the door off the limo.
Yeah. Well, George, I want to wish you and your loved ones a very Merry Christmas and Happy New Year.
Thank you. Same to you. Next year's got to be better, right?
Oh, please, God, let it be better.
And happy birthday, Eric. Us December birthdays, we have to stick together.
Happy birthday to you as well.
Thank you. About the time this posts, I think it'll be around our birthdays. So enjoy.
Yes. As much as we can, anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And, of course, to all our listeners, the same sentiment, Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. And, George, for my listeners, why don't you remind them what Meanwhile the podcast is and where they can get at it or where they can listen to it. Where can they find you?
Meanwhile at the podcast, social media wise, is at Meanwhile at the podcast on Facebook and Meanwhile ATP on Twitter and Instagram. I think Twitter is where we're most active. Rodney, one of my co-hosts, takes care of the Instagram page, and I'm not quite sure how. I don't think he's on there as often as I'm on Twitter. Kristen, our other co-host, she works at a local comic shop here in Northern Virginia called Comic Logic, and Rodney is known as the Art Nerd with 2 R's in the word nerd. Check him out on Facebook and Instagram. And we are available for we are a weekly show. We post every Saturday morning. Our show, it's not like Eric's show where it's focused on comics so much. We're more of an amalgamation of all of his other shows and brands that all put together, because in the vein of Gutters, we talk about ourselves and anecdotes and our slice of life stories. As far as Longbox Review goes, we will talk about comics. As far as his Center Seat project, we will talk about movies. While he focuses on Star Trek there, we'll talk about movies, TV, streaming, things that we've seen, read, listened to. And it's just a lot of fun. Think of us as your weekly hour or so long talk show that you would hear on the radio sans commercials, with no program manager dictating what we have to talk about.
Wait, I thought you were the program manager.
No. We are the three of us have our little bullet points. Now, I will say this: we go off on so many tangents that we very rarely get to all the bullet points. So some of the things we wanted to discuss, we never get to, and especially this year with all the things that have been going on, when it comes to the pandemic and how it's affected us personally. When we get off on a tangent, sometimes we just keep steamrolling on, and before you know it, the hour's up.
Yeah, I know it's a lot of fun, especially when you get other guests on the show and you guys get that conversation going. That's always delightful. Yeah,
thank you. We do get guests on the show. We're not a guest driven show, but there are times where we have guests. Maybe every third episode or so, on average, we'll have a guest.
Mm-hmm.
And Eric, I guess, in the vein of what we've been doing for the past couple of weeks on my show, I guess I should ask you this question: what is your go-to holiday dessert?
Oh yeah, I remember you.
I've been asking
that.
this question on the show this month. So,
yeah.
What is your go-to holiday dessert before we let our listeners go?
What was it? Kristen said it was pumpkin pie, wasn't it?
Yes, that is her major go-to.
Yeah,
yes.
So she and I share that love of that particular dessert.
Okay, pumpkin pie.
That would be my
Great.
go-to.
Cool. Do you make it?
I actually did this for my lonely Thanksgiving. I made my own pumpkin pie. It's
very nice. I don't think
I've
never made a pumpkin pie before. So I may have to maybe next year.
All right. Well, thanks for joining me again, George. And
thank you.
We will talk very soon, I'm sure.
You got it.
At the very least next year at this time. All right. So everybody, thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode. It's always a delight for me to get together with George and talk comic books, especially the absurdity and fun and bizarreness of Christmas comic books. Anyway, if you'd like to leave comments, you can do so at longboxreview.com, or you can chat with me on Twitter at longboxreview, and you can also email me at longboxreview@gmail.com. Thanks for listening, and I will talk to you probably next year.